gracious introduction, which my mom would really love to hear. But anyway, it's great being here in the Dilworth South End Rotary Club today and speak for a few moments about something of which I have invested all of my adult life. And Richard, thank you for this opportunity to speak today. And Lamar, thank you for the invitation. Thank all of you veterans that I saw stand today. We have somewhere between 26 and 29 million veterans in the United States of America. And one thing that you might know that about 10% of that number of our veterans are homeless. And so we really need to be thinking about our veterans, always those who have given their blood, sweat, and tears for us to enjoy our great freedoms. And some of them have a hard time coming home. One of the things that I'm doing with the Southern Baptists, and not just the Southern Baptists, but American citizenry, is looking for intentional ways and a strategy to help our vets come home. It is difficult, especially those who have served in a combat situation, to find something normal. In fact, you've heard the old phrase, the new normal, because life is never the same anymore after your combat experiences. But how can you have that new normalcy in your own life after experiencing the horrors of war? Of course, one of our concerns for our vets today, the definitive wound of this particular war, which is the longest war that we've served in the history of our nation. Since 1775, we've never had a war this long, which is now going into 12 years, supported by an all-volunteer force, 1% of our nation's citizenry, carrying a load for 300 million Americans. And we're starting to see one of the definitive wounds, and that's post-traumatic stress, as well as mild traumatic brain injury. A lot of our troops are suffering that because of these explosions in which they are going through. It's about the only way to describe what happens after one of these improvised explosive devices is what you might see in the context of a child suffering sudden infant death syndrome. Because literally every one of the cells in their bodies is shaken, and all the oxygen comes out for just a moment in time, and then it goes back in. And it's just remarkable how our troops continue to get back up and go back into the fight and continue to redeploy. It's not unusual for you to talk to a veteran in the VA hospital, for instance, from this last war, where they've had 4, 5, 6 deployments since 9/11, to continue to go back and to serve. We're working with the National Football League right now regarding the correlation of post-traumatic stress or the brain injuries and depression or suicide. Perhaps you've seen some of these particular studies. The National Football League is actually working on that, and we're working alongside them of best practices and some lessons that we can learn. Suicide is a problem in the military. In the first 154 days of this calendar year, we had 154 suicides in the United States Army. And it is a concern. We actually had what we call a stand down. We had a timeout. We took a recess in our forces in September to have suicide prevention training. One of the sad things that we've kind of picked up regarding our veterans is that so many of them come back or they are living in a sense of isolation. They're isolated from their family, from their friends, from their God. And sitting in isolation, they often think and do some pretty self-destructive things, be it with alcohol and drug addiction or other addictive behaviors, and of course, self-harm. So continue to pray with us, pray for, embrace, adopt, if you will, a veteran. To help mitigate this problem. And I would say not just our young troops of the last 12 years of war, but perhaps any of our veterans suffer some of these invisible wounds of which we might bypass. I want to talk for just a couple of moments about faith on the battlefield. It's certainly something that I saw and lived myself as I was part of the first surge of forces in 2003. And my apologies to the Marines. We beat the Marines at Baghdad. They'll tell you another story, but the Army went to the west side, the Marines went to the east side. We met in Baghdad. But that was back in 2003. And I was kind of an old guy to go to war. I was in my 50s, and most of the troops are 18 to 24 years old. But Chaplains go where our troops go, and so there we were. And I'll tell you, not only personally for myself as a man of faith, but to see among our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, guardians, our Department of Defense civilians, I saw a level of faith that is unequal to what I see back here in the great United States of America. I would imagine our citizens in New Jersey and New York City, New Orleans, where we've had great tragedy even with this latest storm, know something about faith, or if you've been in a trauma, you know how faith kind of rises. After at 9/11, we got a lot of faith in the United States, but I'll tell you, it's very, very, very important to our troops on the battlefield. Kind of a humorous story for me. I was in the camps of Kuwait right prior to the war beginning, and we were all assigned a bunker in case we had incoming from mortars, or in that case, theater ballistic missiles. And I still remember this one particular day where we had about 12 theater ballistic missiles that were kind of flying around in the region. I never had anything fired at me to my knowledge, other than maybe spitballs or something in school, but I definitely never had a missile being fired at me. So my assigned bunker was bunker number 13 for some reason. And now I'm into biblical numerology, and 13 to me was not a good number. So I chose to go to bunker number 7. This is really a true story. I don't think anyone that was assigned to bunker 13 ever went to it. It was an empty bunker except for the rats and other things that might be there. But I remember crowding in bunker number 7 with a lot of soldiers, and remembering how God, when we had one particular missile that actually pinpointed to the nearest tenth of a meter, or that's very close. And we sat in that bunker, and I really experienced the presence of God and tried to emanate courage and calmness as my soldiers looked me in the eyes to see if the chaplain was a little anxious. And hopefully they saw peace and comfort and strength, because that's what we're supposed to give. I am thankful for our veterans. I'll never be the same as a result of having worn our nation's cloth. And for the past 236 years, here's some interesting figures. 45 million men and women have served in our armed forces. Over 1 million have paid the supreme price for our freedom in serving this great nation. You may not know this, but 88,000 of our military forces are still missing in action. It's kind of a sobering number if you think about that. 45 million serving in the uniform, 1 million dying KIAs. Let me just give you a few numbers. We had 116,000 killed in World War I. 405,000 men and women killed in World War II. By the way, a couple of years ago, I went down to the reunion of the Battle of the Bulge veterans. I didn't realize that at Normandy we had women on the beach. We had a combat nurse, Evelyn Moynihan. You can hear her testimony on NPR. She had 5 battle stars as a result of coming from Normandy to the Battle of the Bulge. So we had women on the beach as well, and they were casualties. 405,000 in World War II. 36,000 killed in action in Korea. 58,253 killed in Vietnam. 110 in Desert Shield, Desert Storm. And the latest count today, around 6,500 killed in action in Iraq and Afghanistan. One of my big concerns today is in Afghanistan this calendar year, we've had almost 60, we call it friendly fire, but it's an issue of Afghan troops that we have trained who are killing the soldiers, the Marines, the airmen that is training. It's kind of a big deal to us, and I'm not sure what the solution is other than getting out of Afghanistan. Most of our troops serving today were only 9 or 10 years old on 9/11. If they remembered anything about that day, it might be the images of the burning Twin Towers, or a gaping black hole in the western wall of the Pentagon, which went through, by the way, the Chief Chaplain's office. Fortunately, we were out, because that wedge, which housed about 8,000 people, most of those folks were gone and preparing to move back into the western side of the Pentagon. They may remember a plane crash in a Pennsylvania cornfield But most likely, like our children or grandchildren, they remember the look on our faces. The look of confusion and concern. The fact that we may have held our loved ones a little closer to give them comfort or even to get some comfort. And a decade later, those 9 and 10-year-olds have grown up. They graduated from high school. A number have graduated from college. And 1% of them are still serving in places like Afghanistan, Iraq. We still have some troops there on the ground. Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, the Sinai, the Horn of Africa, Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, or about 70 or 80 other nations throughout the world, ensuring that we remain a strong American. My heart continues to grieve for the 4 that were tragically killed in Benghazi, Libya, including Senior Petty Officer Tyrone Woods. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said that he had the hands of a warrior, because, by the way, he took out about 20 as he was protecting our ambassador. He was also a combat medic and a paramedic, so she said he also had the hands of a healer. But I like what Tyrone Woods' widow says. She said he had the heart of a believer in Jesus Christ. A really devout man of faith, if you've not heard his dad, Charles, talk about that great tragedy. May we never cease to give thanks to Almighty God for these young men and women I call heroes, true heroes. And perhaps that's the biggest withdrawal I have from leaving Washington, D.C. and going to peaceful Waxhaw, North Carolina. That is a cultural change, I want you to know. We had 26,000 people working in the Pentagon. I don't know if Waxhaw's got that many people as far as citizens. But one thing I miss is walking in those halls of the Pentagon with heroes. And I'm going to talk about a couple of those today. These young men and women who don our nation's cloth, swear an allegiance to the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, to bear true faith and allegiance to the same, taking on our nation's uniform without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, to faithfully discharge their duties. So help them God. There's something about our troops, and many of you are here, when you put on a uniform to our nation, it transforms you. It connects you to an organization that's greater than yourself. It requires a commitment for you to defend the sacred values, the beliefs, the ideals of our great nation. So I'm going to very quickly give you 3 points. Those of you who have sat under Baptist preachers, 2 things about it. Number 1, they usually give you points that are alliterated, so I do have those 3. We're going to talk about a cost, we're going to talk about a cause, we're going to talk about a commitment. And then the other thing with Baptist preachers, they say, I do have a track of time, I do have a watch on. Of course, that usually doesn't mean anything for Baptist preachers. And the scripture that you can go back to, but you've certainly heard it, and I've heard it too many times at memorial ceremonies, is from the Gospel of John, chapter 15, verses 13. Greater love has no one than this, that a man or woman would lay down their life for their friends. Now, first of all, if you're going to lay down your life for your friends, there's usually a noble cause that is involved. Back in June of, I think it was 2007, I can't remember, I met parents of one of our fallen heroes. Parents of Specialist Ross A. McGinnis, a 19-year-old from Meadville, Pennsylvania. Ross had been a problem in school, a little discipline problems. He'd gone to an alternative school, got his asthma corrected, and decided to stay in the alternative school and help his other brothers and sisters graduate. But the thing that changed his life was he joined the military at age 18. And there's something about military training. Some refer to our military training as the greatest leadership training in the world, because it certainly transforms you. It's transformed me. It's transformed one of my son-in-laws, and I've seen it transform innumerable people. Suddenly, Ross McGinnis was believing and acting and doing things in support of a cause greater than himself. He joined the military. And on December the 4th, 2006, he's riding in a very dangerous convoy in Adamiyah, Iraq. An insurgent drops a fragmentation grenade in the top of his vehicle. And when you have a grenade that is live, you've got about 4 seconds to do something. The first command is grenade. And then you have a choice of doing one of two things. Running as fast as you can, or in Ross's case, he decided to protect his fellow soldiers. And so he yelled a grenade, went back down inside the vehicle, braced his back against this fragmentation grenade, taking the full brunt of it, and it immediately killed him. His 4 battle buddies walked away from that vehicle, and as a result, Ross's parents were given the Congressional Medal of Honor by President George Bush at the time because of his heroic feat. And it really was a culmination of a young man who had dedicated himself to serving, pursuing, and following a cause greater than himself. And I would say that's what I see about our troops today. Willing to defend our country. If we didn't have young men and women who stood up and swore allegiance to the Constitution of the United States, we would have continued our struggle against the oppression of the British Empire. Our slavery might never have been eradicated from our shores. Or the rights of Americans might continue to just be a dream. Perhaps the Nazis would have triumphed during World War II. The death camps would never have been liberated or eliminated. Untold millions would never have been saved from gas chambers and furnaces, and communism, a cancer that killed over 100 million and sucked the human spirit from billions during its 70-year lifespan, would still be a challenge for us. Osama bin Laden would perhaps still be alive, and we would not perhaps be the greatest nation on the earth. But 9/11 awakened our nation and our young men and women to continue to volunteer and serve so that we might be the land of the free because of these young, brave men and women. Answering the call to a great cause comes, secondly, at a great cost. In the days in which we have growing concerns over the global economy, rising unemployment, concerns about paying the national and personal debt, you can rest assured one debt has been paid. The check has been paid in full by the blood, sweat, and tears of our young men and women who wear the uniform. Many of them who have given their last full measure of devotion to duty, laying down their life for their friends. In 2009, I had an opportunity at Arlington National Cemetery to attend the funeral of a dead hero, and I didn't know that much about him at the time. I heard a lot of folks talking in the crowd as we walked with the caisson down to where he was laid to rest. You may have never heard of him. He probably is not remembered by most Americans. The most decorated soldier, the most decorated service member during Vietnam. Colonel Robert W. Howard. Anybody ever heard of him? Robert Howard. Native of near Mobile, Alabama. Graduate of Texas Christian University. Served for almost 52 years. 36 years in the Army, and the remaining time he served in the Department of Defense, and also going to visit our troops in Iraq and Afghanistan, encouraging them and giving them best practices on how to survive and how to live. Colonel Bob Howard. He was nominated for the Congressional Medal of Honor 3 separate times for 3 different events. In 1971, he was given the Congressional Medal of Honor by President Nixon. It was not televised because of the attitude towards the war at the time. But let me tell you something about him. He received the Silver Star. He received 3 Distinguished Service Crosses. He received 7 Bronze Stars for Valor. He received 8 Purple Hearts. In a 54-minute firefight of which he received the Congressional Medal of Honor. He was wounded 14 times. Bob Howard. Where do we get men and women of this caliber? A man who says that there's something about resilience that rests in all of us. When we're willing to serve a noble cause, we're willing to pay the price for others. You and I know about, hopefully you know a few of the men and women, got some in this room, who have set aside their dreams, their personal ambitions, to answer the nation's call to duty. They've left the comfort and safety of their home to deploy to some foreign land. They've been willing to sacrifice life and limb, health, and well-being to stand in harm's way, protecting our freedom. Young men and women who were deployed into combat. And when you go into combat, you lose your innocence and a bit of your humanity as you witness the chaos, the terror, and the carnage of war, so that American people can remain free, go to Harris Teeter and Walmart, enjoy life, sleep in peace and safety. I'll still remember all the days of my life at the Assassin's Gate right outside of the Green Zone in Baghdad. About a 500-pound bomb went off. We had 120 civilians who were killed. I still remember that it was such a devastating event. We literally had to pull everyone out of finance and out of admin, and we gave them body bags and masks and told them to clean up the area. And I'll still remember all the days of my life, those young 18 and 19-year-old innocent boys and girls who will never be the same again because of being in uniform and having to take care of business on behalf of our nation. Please keep them in your prayers. Colonel Robert Hudson was a B-52 pilot during Vietnam. He was shot down on the 26th of December, 1972, and was a prisoner of war in the Hanoi Hilton. He remembers a quote on the wall of the prison etched by a fingernail or a small pebble from the previous tenant. And here's what he remembers. Freedom has a costly taste to those who fight and almost die for it, that the protected will never know. Let me read that again. Freedom has a costly taste to those who fight and almost die for it, that the protected shall never know. I was in Birmingham, Alabama a couple of weeks ago and spoke in a little place called Aniana. It's out there in the middle of nowhere, about 40 miles north of Birmingham. But I mentioned former Senator Jeremiah Denton, served from 1981 to 1987. But he also had another bit of service. He was shot down, and he served 8 years in prison in the Hanoi Hilton. 6 years into his sentence, and perhaps you remember the broadcast where he was being interviewed by the North Vietnamese, and he, through Morse code with his eyes, he tapped out torture. Some of you may remember that. He tells the story that after about 6 years, he was ready to give up and die. And he heard a voice from God. And it goes like this. He actually had a rosary, and while Catholic, as he was going through his rosary, he heard this voice say, "Give your heart to Jesus. Give your heart to Jesus." And even though he was a practicing Catholic at that moment, he says, he began and engaged in a deep faith relationship with God that really caused him to survive. In fact, as a result, shortly after that, he spent 2 more years in solitude, solitary confinement. And he said what got him through was his faith. He said, you know what's interesting? I've never felt more companionship and more peace and more presence of God than those 2 years that it was just me and my God. You know, I could tell you the rest of the day. I'm going to stop here very shortly because of time, but I could tell you stories almost as dramatic as that one. One thing for sure, I never saw one troop hesitate, do anything other than lean into fire and into the presence of danger and take the fight to the enemy. Day after day, without hesitation, they climbed into trucks and rode down the most dangerous streets. They climbed into helicopters and flew into the most treacherous terrain that any of us will ever see. The streets of Baghdad and in the hills of Afghanistan. I'll close with this one story of the commitment, if you will. That's my third point. The commitment that our troops pay. And this is regarding Sergeant First Class Jared Monty, 10th Mountain Division out of Fort Drum, New York. It was June 2006 in the hills of northeastern Afghanistan. He was leading a 16-man patrol and they were attacked by over 50 Taliban. There was so much gunfire, the troops say it was almost like a wall of steel was in front of them, like thousands of rifles are like thunder. They were almost overrun. Odds were 3-1. A soldier was hit by a rocket-propelled grenade out in sort of that no man's land between the enemy and the friendlies. And one of the soldiers was going to rescue the wounded because one of our mantra is, I will never leave a fallen comrade behind. I will go after him. Sergeant Monty said, I'll go get my soldier. 3 times he went to try to rescue his soldier. He was wounded. Finally, the mortal wound was from a rocket-propelled grenade. As he lay dying, listen to his words of commitment as he called out to his soldiers. He says, guys, I've made peace with God. Tell my mom and my dad that I love them. And he began to recite the Lord's Prayer. Greater love hath no one than this, that a man or woman would lay down their life for their friends. Let me close with this one. We're beneficiaries of men and women who fought for our freedom. Some of them are here as members of this club. May we continue to cling to the noble cause of freedom by giving ourselves, like this club does, in service to others, to our community, our nation, and our world. What better way can we pass on our national values to our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren than by keeping and imparting this freedom to the next generation? God bless our veterans. God bless the city of Charlotte. God bless America.